Hey, how's it going? It is Friday, June 19th, and this is the Morning Star Drive on 117.8. We're on YouTube, so make sure to subscribe, follow us on SoundCloud, and make sure to support us on Patreon. Today we'll get some coronavirus updates and a new segment on 16 personalities from our very own Wonchon in Korea and answering newcomers when they ask the big question. So, how are you guys doing? You guys must be having an amazing and awesome time because it is Friday, and you know what that means. It's the weekend. The weekend is upon us, and I'm just happy you're joining us here on the Morning Star Drive. Keep liking and commenting. Just want to hear how you guys are doing. Also, what parts do you really like from our segments? Whether it's the stories or whether it's reviewing the word or the current news and updates, music. Just put everything there. Post your song requests and stories too. Remember, everyone, this Sunday, we're going to be meeting a member from Canada, Steve Handy. So I'm looking forward to this fun interview. I've known Steve for a long while now, and he is someone who literally puts his life on the line every day for the Lord. And I don't mean that because he's so old that he could die any moment. Okay, sorry, a bad joke. I just know Steve well, so he would laugh at that joke, I think. Right? But I hope you guys really enjoy these Sunday edition interviews because it's a time to really get to meet everyone in a different way, see what different members have gone through in their lives before and after coming to this history. So go check it out on the Sunday edition. Now, let's get into the featured artist of the day. Today's featured artist, someone who is always in demand and everyone likes, it's Francis Han. He is the jazz pianist, classical pianist, and we're going to listen to the song All the Things You Are. You guys got to listen to this piano bit. Just in this whole song, just listen to the piano. It's so good. The second song we're going to hear is from the Paper Music Associates label. It's from the post-rock artist Xeniac, and we're going to listen to the song Trans-Neptunian Observer. All right, so everyone just sit back, lay back, listen to the music coming from our members. And that is Xeniac with Trans-Neptunian Observation. I hope you guys really enjoyed that song, that post-rock. I haven't heard of post-rock until I listened to this. Also, that first song was from Francis Han, and I hope you guys enjoyed that song also. What was it called? All the Things You Are. All right. So that brings us into, well, we're going to have a coronavirus update, but after that, we're going to have this brand new section going to happen every Friday. Those of you know who Won Chun is. He's from New Zealand. He's going to do a segment every Friday on the 16 personalities. So you're going to get an introduction of what he's going to do. So we're going to hear that right after the coronavirus updates. All right. So let's take a look at the coronavirus updates for today. And it's in the world right now, there's 8.5 million cases with 452,000 deaths. And once again, mortality rate drops to 5.33%. The U.S. is at 2.2 million cases with 120,000 deaths at 5.37%. So we're kind of right there with the global average. Brazil, getting close to a million, 960,000 cases, 47,000 deaths, 4.86%, which means they're dropping very fast too, even faster than the U.S. They're already under 5%. India, 369,000 cases, 12,000 deaths at 3.33%, and they're going up. Saudi Arabia comes out of nowhere. They're here. They're now in the top 6 for most increase in cases. Saudi Arabia is at 146,000 cases, 1,100 deaths. But they're only at around 0.8% mortality rate. We're not sure if it's underreported or not, but it sounds like if there's only 1,100 deaths with 146,000, it should be much higher than that. Pakistan, 160,000 cases with 3,100 deaths, almost 2% in their mortality rate, and that rounds up the top 6. And the Philippines, 28,000 cases, 1,100 deaths, and they have dropped down to 4% in their mortality rate, so they're doing well. Sweden, just to let you know, the only country that didn't do a lockdown, they're down to 9.02%. Remember the last, we were checking before, they were always up to 13%. Now they're down to 9%. And Belgium, highest in the world mortality rate, and they're down to 16.05%. Interesting, a lot of changes when it comes to the largest increases in cases around the world. We have 2 countries that dropped out. So both Peru and Chile have dropped out of the top 6, and now entering is Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. Okay, so when you look at this right now, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, they're both increasing at 4% each, and they're roughly around 5,000 to 6,000 cases per day. But it's interesting Saudi Arabia's coming here. So if you look at the top 6 right now, South America was at they had 3 in the top 6. Now there's only 1. Brazil's the only one remaining. And now we're looking at India, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, which is the Middle East and more towards the western part of Asia. So that's quite interesting how there's a big shift in these cases too. Because now look at Southeast Asia, it's very nominal right now. India's the highest one so far. But Indonesia, they're growing at about 1,000 cases per day at around 3%, but they're still only at 41%, 41,000 cases. And the same as Singapore. Singapore is 41,000 cases, but they're only growing at 1%. But the top is India, and they're 10 times more. Hong Kong, it's just a few people, about 8 people, and they're only at 1,100 cases. And of course, Malaysia, where I'm at, the amount of cases is so low. It's like 10 people the other day, which is close to 0%, and they have a total of 8,500 cases right now at the moment. So that's kind of what's happening right now. And of course, we know that we talked about before, China's growing a lot, like a lot. Not a lot, but I mean, well, they're starting to grow again in Beijing. A lot of things are being locked down. There are even cases of apartment complexes, just areas just completely shut off. You can't even go grocery shopping, and there's no plan for them to get groceries to them. So they're basically taking care of themselves, and neighbors are helping each other. So that's pretty wild and crazy right now. Which brings us into a new section. I'm really, really happy to announce that we're going to have a new section here on the Fridays. It's going to be from our very own Won Chun, who's from New Zealand, but he's also part Canadian, which makes me very happy. Right? So we're going to listen to, he's going to talk about the 16 personalities and how it's going to help us when it comes to taking care of members and understanding each other a lot better. I'm doing my best to bring in some more of these new sections. So bear with me. We're going to have a good time, and we're going to listen to some things about the MBTI personality test. So let's listen up.
Hey guys, I'm Wanshan, and today we're going to be talking about personalities, more specifically the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, MBTI for short. Personally, I think it's a really awesome tool to be able to use if you know how to use it. Um, yeah, and obviously for us with our lives, we're people of action, right? We're always taking action and putting the word into practice, and I think that is like the greatest tool to learn who we are and how to communicate and that kind of thing through our own experiences and the work that we're doing in our lives. But yeah, like I said, this MBTI thing, it's really useful, especially when you start to have kind of questions of like why is it so frustrating to talk to this type of person or a specific person. And I've really really helped me a lot of times to learn these things. And if you want to do a test, you can go to 16personalities.com, or you can type in MBTI or Myers-Briggs online, and you can find a test there. So I'm going to go through these kind of the basics of it, so you can kind of understand what it's all about. So there's 16 types. So you fall into one of these kind of categories, and each type has 4 letters. And the first letter is either extroversion or introversion. So you get an E or an I. And basically this is saying, what world do you prefer? Do you prefer a more introverted, like by yourself? Or where do you gain your energy? You gain it with people. And a good example would be, how are you dealing with COVID-19? Is it hard? Is it heaven? So for my sister, who's totally the opposite for me, from me, it's heaven. She's like, oh, I don't have to deal with anybody. It's great. There's no one that comes into my room and coming to bother me. But for me, I was in quarantine for 4 weeks, and it was really difficult for the last 2 weeks because I just had no interaction. The second letter, sensing or intuition, or S or N. And this is kind of information you gather. Okay, this is how you gather information. And S stands for sensing, and it's more kind of basic information. So you have a room, there's a table, there's a chair, and then on the table there's a phone. Okay, it's all kind of there. But intuition is the kind of information that has meaning behind it, and that's how you see it. You see there's like some interpretation that needs to be done. Why is the phone on the table, right? You might be more like that. The third type is kind of how you decide and how you process that information. So T or F, thinking or feeling. So T is more logical and consistent, but F kind of deals with people, how they feel, the reasonings, their values, their kind of the special circumstances that they might have. And the last letter, J or P, judging or perceiving. And basically, this is kind of your reality, how you operate in the real world. Do you prefer to just decide and to do that? Or are you more open to new information and to options? So, do the test. Whatever category you fall into of the 16, you're all winners in the end. Each kind of personality all has their own strengths and weaknesses. So personally for me, I fall into the ENFP type. And, like you can go through all the strengths, like I'm extroverted, intuitive, feeling, and a perceiving type. And my strengths would be like enthusiastic, imaginative, generally like creative, warm, future orientated. Like you can go through all that kind of strengths that they have, and also weaknesses. And I don't know, like maybe it kind of seems like the Chinese zodiac, and like this year is the year of the rat, I think. And I think that there's kind of like aspects and strengths connected to that. But looking at this MBTI, and only looking at the 4 letters, it's not really going to be very helpful. So you at the moment we've only looked at the basics and the surface of this, but in order to it to be used as a tool, you need to kind of get a more deeper explanation and dive deeper into it. So hopefully we can do that next week. If you want to check out the website, it's 16personalities.com. I mean, there's lots of websites you can check out. That's not the only one. Type in Myers-Briggs, you'll find something. and it's been really awesome. Hope to talk to you soon, and have a great week. See ya.
All right. Thank you so much, Wanchon, for that wonderful introduction to the MBTI test. I'm going to put the link into the description so you guys can be ready for next week. Figure out where your personality lies, and you're going to learn more and more about where you kind of, like, what kind of personality you have and where you're, how you can, get along with different types of personalities too. And I think it's super, super interesting, just the way that God has made all of us like this. So go ahead. I'll put the description, the link for the MBTI test. Go take it, and then every week we're going to look and learn more and new things to it. All right. So what does that mean now? We're going to get into a time where we can all praise and give glory to the Holy Trinity. And since it's the Friday and the weekend, I wanted to pick two songs that everyone would probably know with the lyrics inside their heart. And the two songs I chose was My Life and According to the Lord's Will. So let's all get our voices together, get them warmed up, and we're going to praise and give glory to the Holy Trinity.
And I carry 1,000 years of hopes and dreams in this boat with me, knowing that someday they'll come to be. I am more than words, I bring them to life. More than words alone I speak through deeds. Although my eyes and body are small, I can understand both this world and the next. I see everything my hands and feet are hands and feet of fire. They're more than I can use in just one life. I'll live without regret. Yes, I will use my life for my family, nation, the world. For more than just myself, I'll live for heaven's will. I will live for God without regret. I carry 1,000 years of hopes and dreams in this boat with me, knowing that someday they'll come to be. I am more than words, I bring them to life. More than words alone I speak through deeds. Although my eyes and body are small, I can understand both this world and the next. I see everything my hands and feet are hands and feet of fire. They're more than I can use in just one
teach me though I'm weak in many ways. Lord, come to me and fill me with your wisdom and your strength. I will leave my thoughts behind, and in everything I will live the way you do. Lord, I ask that you speak to me. Please answer as I call on your name. Oh, give me strength to act upon your will, my Lord, and let my thoughts be fixed on you alone. Oh, come to me and teach me though I'm weak in many ways. Lord, come to me and fill me with your wisdom and your strength. You are right here with me, so I'll call out to you, Lord. For you walk by my side, pouring your power on me. If I act on your word, we will achieve victory. Lord, would you use me, and let's fulfill your will on this earth. Oh, give me strength to act upon your will, my Lord, and let my thoughts be fixed on you alone. Oh, come to me and teach me though I'm weak in many ways. Lord, come to me and fill me with your wisdom and your strength. Lord, let me live for you and for your will alone. Oh, can't you feel this earnest heart of mine? Until the end, I'll never give up. I'll fulfill your dream. I will run with you together. We'll fulfill this history. I will do your will, my Lord. It is all I know. I live only for your will.
And that is According to the Lord's Will. I hope you guys, well, I'm sure everyone knows that song. We sang that song like a trillion times before. And of course, that first song we heard was My Life. And that's another one of those favorite songs that everyone really knows well. All right. And that brings us to the time of question of the week. And it's always on Friday we answer kind of a question from people. And today's question is very interesting because it comes about when people ask, when newcomers, you teach them all the way to like the time times half a time lesson, right? And then at the very end of it, some of them will be like, oh my gosh, I realize this isn't this. Oh my gosh, the history of God, right? But then there are some people that kind of like, so, and you can tell the question's coming. They're like, are you saying, like, what you mean is, like, when you start hearing that and they're having a very, very hard time saying it, you know what question's coming, right? And for a lot of people, there's like one of those questions people hate to hear. It's like, oh my gosh, how do I answer that question. What's the right thing to say? What should I not say? Like, is it, oh man, is it going to turn out good or bad? Well, what's the reaction going to be? Will it make me look bad? Did he realize, or is he asking because he doesn't know? Like, and people freak out because it is a it's the big question. Right? It is a big question. And of course, now that we're moving into a time of transparency, you know, that time is coming near too. And of course, we have to realize also that it's a time that we really show who we are, and this is something that we should be very solid and convicted in also, right? But also we're concerned about the newcomer, that we don't want to do anything bad, right? So, you know, of course, we're not going to shout in their face like, what? You didn't know? Or like, what is wrong with you? You need to realize on your own. You know what I mean? Like, it's a little bit different now. And, well, because I don't know for sure, because honestly, that's just kind of what I did before. You know, you kind of just say it like that, and it's kind of funny when you think about answering in that way. But I'm going to tell you about these 2 times that I was asked, but it was asked in a very, very different way. One was very, very recent too. So there's one time I was teaching a JS newcomer, and basically he already knows like what we think. He already knows, right? And, you know, basically he's got a good relationship with his daughter, and the daughter will tell him everything, right? So we're kind of wondering like, oh man, he knows, but he's still studying. That's interesting. Like, why is he studying, kind of thing? So I would spend a lot of time explaining and teaching him and stuff like this too. And one time we went to, we went to go find a Starbucks, but the only place we can go find an open Starbucks was at the hospital. Right? It's a really nice Starbucks in the hospital, and this hospital is super nice. And we went there and we're talking. And the question, you know, he knows what I believe. And he has the same question, but in a different way. And he asked me, has Sansim ever proclaimed who he was? And of course, we know that, especially since he came out in 2018, we're all like, yeah, like pretty open, right? And he's done it before too, but now more than ever, he's very, very open about it. And when he asked me that question, has he ever proclaimed it? And I thought to myself is, like, you know, you're always cautious. Like, I wonder why he's asking this question. I wonder what he's looking for. But for me, you know, you don't have like 2-3 minutes to answer the question. You just got to be honest. Because the one thing I don't want to do, I never want to lie. So I just like, yes, he has. And he said it multiple times. And I was just kind of waiting to see his reaction. And his reaction was, oh, wow, that's bold. Yeah, like, you know, he basically said that's such a bold thing to say that not anyone could actually say that. And he was actually more impressed by it. He was impressed that Sansim actually said that. So I was like, wow, this is interesting. So recently the same thing happened. I was teaching 10 times and a half, and I was teaching it, and then at the end of it, this guy is like, hey, so you're saying that this guy, and you know what's happening, right? And he asked me, and in my head, I was like, you know what? If he wants to know, I'm going to tell him. But I also want to give him a choice. So I went to him like this. I said, all right, hey, if you want to know what I think, I'll tell you straight out. I'll tell you exactly what I think. Yeah, and I'm very confident. I'll tell you exactly what I think. And he says, oh, okay. I said, but I also want to give you a choice. And he's like, okay, why you, like, what choice? I was like, think about it this way. Imagine what I say. So let's just pretend I say yes. Yes, he is. But reality is he isn't. But then you listen to me, then we're both screwed. Like, then you're following me blindly. And, you know, you're going to go into the bad place. He's like, oh, that's true. But I said, what if I said the opposite? What if I say he isn't, but then he is? Then if you're influenced by that too, then you're also going to go to the, you know, we're going to both be going down the same path. And he's like, oh, that's true. So I said, okay. So I leave this up to you. And I was very confident. Like, if he said, yes, tell me, I would have told him confidently, convicted out to him, absolutely. And I'll tell him why I believed, right? But instead, I said, yeah, I leave it up to you. And he's like, oh, that's so true. And then he says, no, don't tell me. I don't want to be influenced by it. And then, you know, I'm going to teach him when I teach 10 times and a half, I teach it into 3 parts. I split it into 3 parts. Right? So these 3 parts I split into, and I taught him the first time, blown away. Second time, he's like, oh, okay. He's basically realizing, right? And then I'm going to teach him one more time, but I gave him another week, and he didn't want to hear it. He's like, oh, no, I want to listen. I want to figure it out on my own. So that's why I was like, oh, okay. And I think because, you know, going into transparency doesn't literally mean you're like shouting at them saying, oh, you know, the Christ has come, oh, no, you know, in that way. But to be in transparency is to be very confident. right? It doesn't mean you stop wisdom, right? Because wisdom is allowing some people, some people need to realize on their own. Some people need to be told. Some people need just a little bit of a push, right? Some people need a little bit of a pull. And this is something that wisdom that comes from the Holy Spirit. And that's something that we have to really be able to understand in a much better way. Because if we don't understand it, if we just kind of just blurt it out, then people get tested and stuff, right? Some people aren't ready for it. And this is why we need to continue to really understand it in a much better way, right? We have to really be able to teach this more properly and better so that we can really get ourselves to understand just be sensitive to it, to these people when they ask it, but you should never lose that confidence and that conviction. Like if it comes down to it and they want to know, just tell them. And tell them why. It's kind of like another question that people ask me is very similar. My answer right now is very similar when people ask me, well, I don't know the word very well. I can't teach the Bible study, so how can I testify? And my answer is, testifying is not about teaching the word. That's not testifying, right? Testifying is you talking to them and saying, this has changed my life. This is something that just amazed me so much. You got to listen to this. But that's a testimony. Testimony isn't, here, let's sit down, I'm going to teach you about the fire. That's not a testimony. That's lecturing. That's a Bible study. Testimony is your experience with God, your experience with the Word. And that's completely different than lecturing. And I do believe that at this time, we got to be more bold, right? Not being stupid, right? Not being just blunt. But we have to be those that are still wise and we discern. And yet, when it comes down to it, we still have to, we have to be absolutely convicted, absolutely confident in what we believe and what we teach, right? It's interesting too, because this actually brings me to one of the announcements I wanted to make about lecturing. So for those of you who are on Patreon, because I actually started a lecture training series, and it's my first one. I'm actually going through it with a real group, and now that we're doing most of these meetings, every meeting we do now is over Zoom or it's over some type of platform where we have a video conference call. And I've started 2 lecture training teams. And I've been recording them. So I've been editing them for different lessons, the core 8 lessons plus extra lessons too. And I am actually going to post them, a lecture training. But I'm not going to, because it's about lecturing, I'm not going to post them in public. So I'm only posting them on Patreon, right? So those of you who are on Patreon, we've already discussed on Patreon. There's about 70, 80 people on Patreon right now. And for those of them that really want to do lecture training, I'm going to post up my videos 1 a week. And I'm also going to put up quizzes, and people have to memorize Bible verses and stuff like that too. But for those of you who want to do lecture training, I'm going to be honest with you guys too. This lecture training is for people who already know how to lecture. This is not for beginner lecturers. You can still listen to it, but it's totally not for beginner lecturers. It's for people who already understand the basics of all the Bible studies. So those of you who are beginners, you'll still benefit from it, but it won't be as big as a benefit for the people who are already lecturing, right? So those of you who are already lecturing, you guys will benefit the most from this for sure, right? So I'm not going to post it this week. Next week. Today's the 19th, so it'll be posted. I believe it'll be posted next week at the last week of June. Yeah, last week of June. So I'm going to be posting them 1 per week. Right, and those of you who don't know Patreon is a crowdfunding site. This is how we, sponsor and support for all the people that are working on these 2 YouTube channels. And there's no, I know it's going to be like, oh my gosh, but you have to pay money. But this is something you can actually put your own amounts. Like some people only pay like $1 a month. Right, so it's not like it's nothing like, we're not saying you have to put in like $50. No, you can put whatever you want in there. It doesn't really make a difference. Even if you put 1 cent, I wouldn't even care, right? But for Patreon, those of you who really want to do it, if you sign up for Patreon for this Patreon for the MSD 117.8, the lecture training will be posted, and we're going to have not just the 8 core lessons, but even the supporting lessons, because supporting lessons are just important. I'll give you an example. Like for instance, in the core lessons, spiritual world is not in it, right? You're not going to learn, spiritual world is not part of the core 8. However, you need spiritual world to teach rapture. you need spiritual world to teach the fall, and you need spiritual world to teach the Holy Son. Like, so even of the core 8, almost 40% of the lessons, 3 of the 8, like almost half of them, need spiritual world. Like, you're going to need parables too, right? Like, there's a lot of lessons that people need as a foundation before you go into those big lessons. So I do teach those very big foundation lessons, but it's like I said, I'm not going to be teaching like a straight lesson like you're listening to a Bible study. That's something I'm going to do in the future. But it's going to be mainly lecture training, how to lecture, how to intro, how to answer questions. So that's something that I really find that's important, that we'll be able to use especially for those who are lecturing. Even if you're someone who's lectured maybe even half, it'll be very beneficial too. So it'll help you to get into the deeper lectures. And a lot of people who have been lecturing for a while, they've been saying that it's been helpful because, you know, when you teach something for a long time, you kind of like trying to figure out a new way to do it. Like, you know, 3 divisions, those of you who have been lecturing, like those beginning lessons, we've probably taught 1,000,000 times. And then you're like, oh my gosh, it's so boring now. Like, how do I teach it in a different way? Yeah, I'll teach like maybe up to 6 different intros you can do to get into 3 divisions also. So that's something that's only going to be available on Patreon. Only on Patreon. So if you want to get on that, I just don't want to put a lot of the information public. So I'm going to put that onto Patreon. So those of you who want to listen to that can do it. And, you know, if you could do it as a team, you know, if you have a couple people there, do it as a team. You know, you guys all chip in like a buck each or whatever it is. And then you can watch it together and do the program. I'll put the quizzes and stuff and the answer to the quiz. Like, I'll put the quiz starting in the next lecture. Like, for instance, your quiz will be at the next lecture. So the next lecture, I'll attach the quiz that you're supposed to take, and then the answer for the quiz is from the week before, right? So that you guys can do it. And I'll put up some encouragement videos and such like that to help you guys out how to run this lecture training program. Cool. So those of you, once again, those of you guys who are lecturing or who already been somewhat lecturing, even up to intermediate, there will be lecture training available on Patreon. And hopefully I'll have it up either by next week or the week after that, where July, I was thinking July might be a little bit better as a good fresh start to start it in the right way. So that's kind of my quick announcement for you guys there too. All right, so that brings us into the song of choice, and the song of choice for today, we have another request. Great song too. This is from Ina in Minnesota. She's like one of the super fans for this podcast, and she wanted to request Lauren Daigle. And the song is called First. And those of you guys don't know Lauren Daigle, she's a contemporary Christian singer. She's very, very young. I think she's 27 right now. But her story is amazing. She had a disease before when she was young. She had a disease that affected her immune system, which basically made her, like, she had to stay at home for 2 years. She couldn't go out. That's how hard it was. But during this time, her mom encouraged her to learn how to sing. She started to learn how to sing. And then, man, she's a great singer. And just listen to this song. She's a Christian singer, so when you listen to the lyrics, it's very, very telling, putting God first. All right, so let's listen to Lauren Daigle singing First.
Before I bring my need, I will bring my heart. Before I lift my cares, I will lift my arms. I wanna know you, I wanna find you in every season, in every moment. Before I bring my need, I will bring my heart and seek you. Speak a word, let me hear your voice. And in the midst of pain, let me feel your joy. Ooh, I wanna know you, I wanna find you in every season, in every moment. treasure and my reward. Let nothing ever come before. You are my treasure and my reward. Let nothing ever come before. I seek you first. I wanna seek you. I wanna seek you first. I wanna keep you. I wanna keep you first. More than anything I want you
All right, that is Lauren Daigle, and that song is First. She's a Christian contemporary artist. She's great. Thank you so much, Ina in Minnesota, one of our super listeners, super fans. I hope that you enjoyed that song. Great song. All right, so that brings us into the story of the day. Of course, we just did a big 4-part series of my time with Sunstream in 1999 in August. Not even my first year. It was like basically my first year in this history. So today I'm going to testify about someone else, right? Because you guys have heard enough of me already, right? So thank you guys for all your comments and such. And we're going to move a little bit forward here. All right. So this is actually a testimony I heard from one of my good friends in Korea. And she was back in, I think, 2006 to 2009, for about 3 to 4 years. I was in Korea, and I was the national campus lecturer, and I was in the HQ, right? So I was one of the campus HQ for about 3 years, and we had this amazing team that worked together. And there's this one leader there, pastor, amazing, like so Holy Spirit type, kind and motherly, and just really just took care of everyone, soft-spoken, but she was very, very good. Like, I was someone you just feel comfortable with. She was only like a year older than me, but she felt very, very motherly. And one time we were traveling because I was lecturing, and we're going around and we're on the train, and I asked her, like, how did you come? Like, what was your testimony? She gave me this amazing testimony. It blew my mind. I think she's been in this history for like 25, 26 years already. So she's way before me. Well, way, because I'm 22 years, right? She was like 25, 26 years, right? And she came when she was in high school. And that's a time basically in the 90s, like the mid 90s to the early 90s. And I think it was mid 90s. And she was saying that that's a time where, Wonmyeongdong is being built. It's not fully made yet. And she had a friend that became a member, and the friend was inviting her, but to her, she's like, she thought she was an amazing Christian, right? Like, I'm faithful, I believe, I go to church, I've evangelized people, I've read the Bible twice. So I was just like going, wow, like even before, I barely know anyone who's read the Bible twice or even once before coming to Providence, right? Very, very rare people actually read the Bible like straight through from beginning to end, but she read it like twice or 3 times. So I was like, wow, she's really good. And she says that, yeah, she really was proud of her faith. She was like, she really did well. She went to church. She was like in leadership, everything else. So she was in Korea at that time. Well, obviously she's Korean, right? So this is when Sunstream was living in a house in Seoul. I forget what area it was called, but it's a really nice house he has. And her friend brings her to the house to meet him, right? So the friend must be excited because this person agreed to meet Sunstream. Okay, so she goes to the house, and basically Sunstream's counseling. So she's waiting for him, and then Sunstream finishes counseling, and she's, oh, hi, nice to meet you. He's like, oh, okay, I'll be back. I just finished counseling, so let me eat, and I'll meet you next, right? So she's like, oh, okay. And then of course he goes back into his room, and she began, like, she was She said she waited for like another 2 hours. And she got to the point where she's like, what the heck am I doing here? Who is this guy that I'm waiting for? Like, who is this guy? Right? Like, why am I here even like, why do I wait so long? But she's like, well, I can't really leave though, because my friend is here with me. And, and the friend also looks like really nervous because it's like, oh my gosh, she's waiting so long. So finally, after waiting this long, she goes into Sunsi's room, right, to counsel or to meet him. And she said that, like, after waiting for this long, she goes into the room, and what happens is she's like, there's no way she's ever expected this before, because this is a pastor, right? You gotta think about it, because, people who meet him for the first time thinking that he's a pastor, right? So she goes in, and they asked her 3 questions. So right away, she's like, oh, nice to meet you. And he says, hey, how many times you read the Bible? And she's like, 2, 3. And he's like, I've read the Bible over 2,000 times. She's like, oh. He's like, hey, how many people have you evangelized? And she's like, well, and she had to think about it. She's like, I think 2. And he's like, are they still going to church? And she's like, I know one of them's not going and the other one I'm not sure. And basically he's like, how much have you prayed? And she said she's never been so shocked. Like, she couldn't say, and she felt so embarrassed in front of him, right? Like, oh, what do I say? Because, the whole time she's thinking she's okay, like she believes in God and she's fine. And this pastor just calls her out, makes her wait for like 2 hours. And then when she goes in, calls her out. Right? And then Sunsi just talks about all the things that he's done. Like, I evangelized 10,000 people in a year, and she's like, oh, and she can't say anything. Right? But she's also shocked. Can you imagine that? You're meeting a pastor, and the whole time you're just shocked because, like, how many times you read the Bible? Really? Just twice? Just 3 times? Yeah, I've read it 2,000. Like, oh, how many people you evangelized? I've read it too. And she said you're just so exposed. Right? And of course, as someone who is kind of, she said, she was kind of like a little bit arrogant, like thinking that she was she was a good Christian and everything else like that. But she was so shocked. And of course, time went on, and she learned the word, and she finished the word, and then she realized the history. So now she realized. And now, this is now the second time she meets Sunsi. And it's in Wolmyeongdong. And I believe like work is going on or something's happening. It's like right after Sunday service. And she's like, oh my gosh. Like, she can now remember the first time they met, and she felt so embarrassed. Like, oh my gosh, he must have seen my heart, how arrogant I was at that time. No wonder he asked me all those questions. So she, after realizing, can you imagine how she felt? So she's telling me she was so embarrassed, and she couldn't come like next to him because he's like, oh, but she wanted to say sorry. She really did. So after service, like, I think they're watching construction or watching sports or something's happening, and Sunsim's sitting in a chair, and she said about 30 meters in front of him. There's like thousands of people there, and she's 30 meters behind, and she's like embarrassed, and she doesn't know what to say. So she gets on her knees and she starts praying and repenting, like, I'm so sorry that I was like that in front of you, like I was like that to you, that you had to call me out. And she's repenting, and she's like, I'm sorry, I'm just sorry, I'm so sorry I did that, I didn't know. And she was in tears. And when she finished her prayer, she opened her eyes and she looked at Sunsim, and she said that when she looked at Sunsim in his chair facing forward turns around, looks at her, and then slowly nods his head, like the feeling was, it's okay. And then he looks forward again. And she said she's never, like, can you imagine that feeling at that moment? She said that feeling was, he heard my prayer. And the moment she looked up, he looked back at her, nodded his head like everything's fine. And he looked forward again. She said, oh, like she couldn't believe 30 meters behind with thousands of people. And at that moment after her prayer, he would turn back, look at her straight in the eyes, and then nod his head and say, Like, he was like, yeah, I understand. Don't worry about it. So when I heard that testimony, I was just like, wow, that's so crazy. And, I know that a lot of us too, there's a lot of things that we've done before knowing this history. There's a lot of things we did we're probably not proud of, right? But we have to know that when we repent and when we come before God, you can't be scared, right? You just got to do it. Because a lot of times people, because they feel like they're going to get judged, or if they feel really bad, or they're self-conscious about their image, that they don't want to say stuff, or they might think someone else hears it. But in the end, it's not going to matter. It's just between you and God. And just to be able to get that confirmation, like when I heard that testimony, I was like, oh, that's so mind-blowing. But I hope that you guys too can have these experiences. We may not be able to have it physically right now. You might have a chance when you go visit, but these are spiritual experiences that we have to have each and every day. So I really hope that you guys really enjoyed today's story of a member. All right. So I hope you guys had a wonderful Friday podcast on the Morning Star Drive at 117.8. And I really hope that you guys will just enjoy your weekend. Just enjoy it with the Lord. Enjoy it with your family, your friends, as some countries are coming out of lockdown. And I hope that you guys will just realize even more on this Sunday's Sunday service, the Sunday message. And we'll take another message, and God is gonna watch us to see what we do during that message too. Everyone, have a wonderful weekend.
You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life